In the spring of 2021, on March 3rd, Chicago police received a missing persons report for 36-year-old Emily Hudson, who lives in the upscale Lincoln Park neighborhood. Emily did not show up for work and did not answer her cell phone, which was completely uncharacteristic of her. Her colleagues at the local PR agency where she held a senior position were the first to sound the alarm. Emily was always organized, never missing an important meeting, much less going silent for days at a time. Her husband, 39-year-old Michael Hudson, called police the next day, claiming he last saw his wife on the evening of March 2nd as she was getting ready to meet up with friends. Michael claimed he went to bed earlier, and when he woke up in the morning, Emily was gone. He speculated that she might have stayed with one of her friends, but when they reported that they hadn't seen Emily, he thought that she might have just left on business, as she sometimes did. He looked concerned, but police immediately noticed that his demeanor was somewhat strained and emotionally restrained. Police began their investigation by going to the Hudson home. Emily and Michael lived in a large, two-story house surrounded by expensive neighborhood homes. The house looked neat, but the police noticed one detail. In the bedroom where Emily was allegedly getting ready for a meeting, all of her belongings were in their proper places. Neither her purse nor her cell phone were found. There was an unfinished cup of coffee in the kitchen, which seemed odd for a woman known for her habit of meticulously planning everything down to the last detail. A search of the backyard revealed nothing suspicious to the police, but Michael himself seemed distant and hesitant. The police soon turned their attention to the surveillance footage from the Lincoln Park security cameras to see where Emily might have gone. Checking the video from cameras near the house, they found that no cameras recorded her leaving the house that night. That detail caught their attention. How could she have disappeared so discreetly? Meanwhile, the police station began receiving calls from neighbors. One of the neighbors, an elderly woman, claimed to have seen Michael and another woman outside their home late on the evening of March 2nd. According to her, the woman was not Emily. She looked younger and had blonde hair. Police speculated that it could have been one of Emily's friends, but so far it was only a guess. Investigators began digging deeper into the Hudson family relationship, and soon disturbing details surfaced. Michael, the head of a large consulting firm, was known not only for his professional successes, but also for his love affairs. His name had come up several times in office conversations in connection with one of his female employees, 27-year-old Jessica Miller, who had been working with him on important projects for the past 6 months. Jessica was beautiful and ambitious, and rumors of their connection started circulating months ago. Colleagues said that Michael and Jessica's relationship seemed much more personal than just a work relationship. No one knew how close they really were, but police officers decided to find out. After checking Emily's phone records, it was discovered that she had been calling her attorney frequently over the past few weeks. The police suspected that Emily might have been preparing for a divorce, but this hypothesis had no confirmation yet. At the same time, they requested Michael's calls and messages to clarify his relationship with Jessica. Everything was coming to the point that Michael and Jessica's love affair might have been more than just a rumor. When the police called Jessica in for questioning, she acted confident enough, stating that Michael was only a boss to her and there was no personal relationship between them. However, her story did not completely agree with what colleagues and neighbors had told. One of Michael's office coworkers told police that he had seen them together at a restaurant a week ago, and the relationship looked decidedly non-businesslike. What's more, camera footage from the same restaurant confirmed this. A key moment occurred when police were given permission to check Michael and Jessica's cell phone data. On the night of Emily's disappearance, the phones of both were in the same neighborhood, which contradicted their stories. Moreover, Michael's phone had several deleted messages that experts were able to recover. These messages were addressed to Jessica, and the conversations were clearly personal, full of emotion and tension. The last messages sent on the night of Emily's disappearance spoke of a meeting at the Hudson's house. Meanwhile, the forensics team examined the Hudson home more thoroughly, and their attention was drawn to the driveway behind the house leading to the garage. The tire tracks, barely visible on the dirt, matched the tire size of Jessica's car, which was registered in the parking lot outside Michael's office. This information was confirmed by the surveillance cameras of a neighboring house. Investigators turned their attention to the financial side of the case. They checked the Hudsons' bank accounts and credit cards and found that in the weeks before Emily's disappearance, Michael had withdrawn a large amount of cash. This movement of funds raised suspicions, especially amid rumors of a family rift. It also emerged that Emily had taken out insurance for a large sum of money several months before her disappearance. Gradually, a picture of the crime began to emerge. Michael Hudson may have plotted to get rid of his wife, using his mistress Jessica to finally end their marriage. The questions remained. How exactly did this happen, and where had Emily disappeared to? But one key point remained uncertain. If Michael and Jessica were involved, then where was Emily's body? Chicago police continued to investigate Emily Hudson's disappearance. The questions multiplied, but some answers began to emerge, though those answers only pushed the investigation into the darker sides of the story. Detectives turned their attention to Michael Hudson and his co-worker Jessica Miller, suggesting that their secret affair could have led to something much more serious than just a family disagreement. After cell phone data was obtained, suspicions were heightened. The coincidence of Michael and Jessica's cell phone locations on the night of Emily's disappearance was key. It indicated that they were near the house at the same time. The police knew this fact would be an important piece of evidence and requested permission for a full analysis of their movements over the past few days. 2 days after Emily's disappearance, on March 5th, investigators went to Jessica's house to search it. Although Jessica herself was sure of her innocence, as proved by her behavior during the interrogation, the police believed that her relationship with Michael was not accidental. They found nothing special in Jessica's house: documents, work, the usual environment. However, their attention was drawn to her car, a black sedan, which several times fell into the field of view of surveillance cameras in the area of Lincoln Park. Upon closer inspection of the car, forensics found faint traces of blood on the passenger seat mat. The stain was small enough to go unnoticed, but in the context of the ongoing investigation, it mattered. Investigators took samples for DNA testing and sent them to a lab for testing. Results were expected in a few days, but police were already guessing that it might have been Emily's blood. In parallel with this analysis, the investigation began examining surveillance tapes, not only those near the Hudson home, but also those covering the roads leading to the south side of Chicago. It wasn't long before an important piece of evidence was uncovered. On the night of Emily's disappearance, a car similar to Jessica's had been spotted at the Lincoln Park exit, traveling toward the suburb of Calumet City on the south side of the city. Police knew this information could have been a clue. At the same time, the forensics team traveled again to the Hudson home. Last time, they focused on the main areas: the bedroom, the kitchen, the living room. But this time, it was the garage that caught their attention. There, behind dust-covered boxes, they found an odd assortment of items: rope, tape, and rubber gloves. These items, while not appearing obviously criminal, were in the garage for no apparent reason. This seemed suspicious, especially in light of current events. All items were seized for further analysis. A little later, the DNA test results came back. The blood found in Jessica's car belonged to Emily Hudson. This fact tied all the elements together: the disappearance, the connection with Jessica, Michael's suspicious behavior. The police began to piece together the facts, but Emily's body was never found. Digging deeper into analyzing the suspect's movements, police turned to GPS data from Jessica and Michael's vehicles. It turned out that both vehicles were in the same neighborhood, Calumet City, on the night of March 3rd. This remote suburb, with its abandoned industrial buildings and rusting warehouse complexes, represented the perfect place to hide evidence of the crime. The police hypothesized that this was where Emily's body had been taken. Meanwhile, the investigation began to delve into Michael's financial history. Shortly before Emily's disappearance, he withdrew about $50,000 in cash from their joint bank account. At first, it seemed strange, but Michael explained it as preparation for an investment in a new project. However, it turned out that no investment project existed, which only increased suspicion. Where was the money being channeled to? Were they part of a pre-planned crime? In an effort to find Emily's body, Police began looking at surveillance footage and GPS movements in the Calumet City area. This location seemed key. Densely wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and industrial zones provided enough hiding places to hide evidence. The task force began scouring the neighborhood, following the routes the GPS records showed. Several days of searching yielded no results, but on the fourth day, the police got lucky. In an abandoned lot near one of the old factories, police found a package wrapped in cling film. Inside was the body of a woman. The condition of the body was not immediately identifiable, but clothing and jewelry found at the site belonged to Emily Hudson. The body was mutilated, indicating a violent death. This discovery confirmed the police's worst fears. Police immediately arrested Michael Hudson and Jessica Miller. The evidence gathered over the past few days was incontrovertible. Blood in Jessica's car, GPS traces, and the fact that both vehicles were in Calumet City the night of the disappearance. They became the prime suspects in Emily's murder. The motive for the crime was becoming clearer and clearer. Michael and Jessica planned to get rid of Emily so that they could continue their relationship without obstacles. They assumed her disappearance would look like an escape or a random missing person, but the traces they left behind proved too obvious. After the discovery of Emily Hudson's body, the case took a new turn. It has now officially become a murder investigation, and the Chicago Police Department has accelerated its actions. Emily's body was sent for a forensic examination to get an accurate determination of the cause of death. Although outward signs pointed to a violent death, the investigation required all the details to be clearly established. Time of death, method, and possible traces that could help determine how the crime was committed. The doctors determined that Emily died of strangulation. The rope marks on her neck, combined with other injuries, made it clear that she had been killed deliberately and without the possibility of resistance. Meanwhile, investigators continued to examine Michael and Jessica's home and possessions. Every corner of their personal lives was subject to scrutiny. Police officers, including the cybercrime unit, studied digital data, and soon it brought the first results. It turned out that Michael and Jessica had been corresponding via encrypted messengers, discussing their actions in the weeks before Emily's disappearance. Messages recovered through special programs confirmed that the plan was made in advance. Jessica had actively persuaded Michael to take decisive action. She not only insisted on getting rid of Emily, but also suggested specific methods. The messages were full of disturbing details. They discussed how to hide the body, how to get rid of evidence, and even how to build their alibis. The plan seemed well thought out, though not without the mistakes that led to their exposure. At the same time, the investigators discovered financial traces that further strengthened the accusation. It turned out that the $50,000 withdrawn by Michael was part of a transaction related to an attempt to organize his departure from the country. In one of the bank documents, investigators found a transfer of money to an offshore account, suggesting a possible attempt to flee after the crime. Michael prepared an insurance policy for himself, planning to disappear as soon as the case was completed. However, this did not work. The web of evidence was tightening around both suspects, and the investigators already knew that all that was left was to put the final pieces of the puzzle together. There was one problem, however. Proving that Jessica had played a key role in the crime was more difficult than with Michael. Despite their reports and apparent motives, there was still no actual evidence of her direct involvement in the murder. Police eyes turned again to her car, which remained a key element of the investigation. Forensic experts conducted an in-depth analysis of the traces in Jessica's car. In addition to the bloodstains that were confirmed to be Emily's, pieces of fabric were found on one of the back seats that matched the clothing Emily was last seen wearing alive. This indicated that she had been transported in that car after the attack. Furthermore, the autopsy of the car's electronic systems recovered GPS data that confirmed that Jessica was in the Calumet City area at the same time as Michael. This linked her to the location where the body was found. Police also analyzed surveillance camera data from different areas of the city. One of the key findings was footage from a gas station in the Garfield Ridge neighborhood. The cameras captured Jessica's vehicle on the night of Emily's disappearance. The video showed her getting gas and pulling out onto a road leading to the southern suburbs. Attentive officers noticed another important detail. On the back seat of the car was barely recognizable dark package, which could be Emily's body. Meanwhile, the forensic examination revealed additional evidence on the victim's body. Microscopic particles were found in Emily's hair that matched substances found in the basement of Jessica's home. It was fine wood dust left over from old construction material that had been used to renovate the house several years ago. This material was not found anywhere else except in Jessica's house. This indicated that Emily may have been in that particular location for some time. Along with this evidence, police experts also found Jessica's fingerprints on the tape in which the body was wrapped. This finally strengthened the theory that she was not only involved in hiding the body, but may have been the direct perpetrator of the crime. The evidence was piling up, and the police were ready to charge both suspects with accessory to murder. But the investigation didn't end there. Investigators decided to delve deeper into how Jessica and Michael met and what was the catalyst for their plan. Jessica's co-workers said their relationship with Michael began about a year before Emily's disappearance, and it was passionate and secretive from the start. Jessica, according to her acquaintances, has always been ambitious and willing to do a lot to achieve her goals. Michael, on the other hand, appeared to be vulnerable in his marriage. His relationship with Emily had begun to deteriorate a year before the events, when he increasingly stayed late at work to spend time with Jessica. One of Jessica's co-workers even recalled an incident where she spoke candidly about wanting to get rid of an obstacle to happiness. These words were not taken seriously at the time, but now they have become part of the big picture. In parallel, investigators continued to question Michael. Despite his initial attempts to deny involvement in the crime, the pressure of the evidence mounted, and eventually he admitted his complicity. In his testimony, he tried to portray himself as a victim of Jessica's manipulation, claiming that she was the mastermind behind the plan. However, the communications between them and his financial machinations said otherwise. Eventually, the investigation established a clear picture of what happened the night Emily disappeared. Michael and Jessica planned the murder in advance. They set it up so that they had alibis and tried to cover up the crime, assuming that the police would not be able to link them to Emily's disappearance. However, the mistakes they made at every turn became fatal. The investigation of Emily Hudson's murder has come to its logical conclusion. Jessica and Michael found themselves in the center of attention of law enforcement. Against them collected an extensive evidence base, which included digital footprints, financial fraud, surveillance cameras, and physical evidence found in their home and car. All that remained was to tie all of these elements into one impenetrable chain of charges. In late May 2021, investigators conducted final interviews with both suspects. Jessica initially insisted on her innocence, continuing to maintain that she knew nothing of Emily's fate until after her body was discovered. However, under the pressure of evidence and thoughtful questions built on the case file, her version began to crumble. The detectives knew that the key moment was when Emily's body was in her car. Surveillance footage, blood traces, and fingerprints left no chance for false excuses. When the detectives presented Jessica with the totality of the evidence, her fingerprints on the tape, the match of the wood dust from her basement to what was found on the victim's body, and the records of her trips to the gas station the night of the murder, her face turned pale. She realized that the police knew her movements in detail. Then she changed her tactics and tried to pass herself off as an unwitting participant. In the new version, she claimed that she had acted on orders from Michael, who had insisted on getting rid of Emily for the sake of their shared future. Jessica claimed she feared for her life and succumbed to her lover's entreaties, but her testimony was not credible. Investigators realized that in front of them, not a victim of manipulation, but an active accomplice. Recovered messages from messengers confirmed that it was she who put pressure on Michael, convincing him to commit a crime. There were several moments in the correspondence when Jessica explicitly stated that she would no longer tolerate Emily's presence in their lives and insisted that murder was the only way out. As the investigation progressed, Michael remained in isolation. His attorney tried to build a defense that Michael had been captured by Jessica's influence. However, investigators were convinced that he also played an active role in the crime. Financial transfers to offshore accounts, Large cash withdrawals, planned trips, and attempts to create an alibi all pointed to his involvement in organizing and covering up the trail. Both suspects were soon in custody. At the trial, which began in October 2021, a wealth of evidence was presented. The prosecution built its line that Michael and Jessica had planned Emily's murder together in an effort to start a new life without interfering factors. There was testimony from co-workers, recovered reports, forensic evidence, and forensic testimony. It all added up to a picture of cold-blooded and premeditated murder. The details recovered by the investigation painted the following scenario. On the night of the murder, Michael and Jessica waited for Emily to return home after meeting her friends. Michael, using his keys, silently entered the house where he attacked Emily. And then, together with Jessica, they moved the body to her car. Jessica had to dispose of the body, which she did by driving it to the outskirts of Calumet City. They planned to make sure no one would connect it to them. The only thing they hadn't envisioned was surveillance cameras and a close investigation. During the trial, the prosecution presented information about Michael's financial plans that finally convinced the jury of his motives. He not only tried to hide his involvement in the murder, but also prepared funds in advance to leave the country with Jessica. This proved his direct interest in Emily's death. Michael and Jessica's lawyers tried to build a defense on the fact that they allegedly acted under the influence of each other and did not plan the murder in advance. They insisted on the version that what happened was a spontaneous decision. However, the collected materials and witness testimonies dispelled this theory. The investigation revealed that the preparations for the murder had been underway for several months. When it came to sentencing, the court left not the slightest doubt in the guilt of both defendants. Michael and Jessica were found guilty of first-degree murder, and each received the maximum sentence. Their actions were deemed willful and cynical. Following the trial, the families of both parties were plunged into deep shock. Emily's relatives, despite the verdict, could not believe the brutality of what had happened. They had lost a daughter, a wife, and a mother, and it changed their lives forever. For Michael and Jessica's family, the shock was no less. They found it hard to accept that their loved ones were capable of such a crime. A few months after the trial ended, the story of Emily Hudson's murder became one of the most talked about in Chicago's criminal circles. Journalists following the case released several high-profile articles about Michael and Jessica's lives before and after the tragedy. New details emerged about Michael's financial difficulties, his ties to illegal businesses, and how Jessica manipulated those around her for her own gain. Although the truth was revealed and the perpetrators punished, the investigation left a deep imprint on everyone involved. The detectives in charge of the case have admitted more than once that the kind of cold-bloodedness with which Michael and Jessica went about the murder will forever be etched in their minds.